Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. I'm Jeff Daugherty. I'm the Christian Whistleblower. Welcome to the Gospel Truth Channel. And I'm really excited today and honored to have with us Mr. Ernst Wilhelm. He is from www.cardsoftruth.com. And he is my card mentor. I subscribe to his site, which is a nice little pay site, which gives you tons and tons of information about the cards of truth. And also, Ernst is the person that would it be fair to say you got Heidi into astrology, or Heidi uses your astrological methodology?
Actually, Heidi uses my software.
Okay.
But she's really never studied with me. We talk a little bit, but I know I haven't got her into it. She did that all herself.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But Heidi does use Ernst software for sure. And Heidi herself, Ernst, I don't know if you know, she's kind of been, since I've started in, she's been dabbling in the cards of truth too, and she finds that they're really profound.
Yeah, I know she's been playing with them, which is great.
They are awesome. They really are. Just a little bit of background on you, Ernst. How long have you been interested in cards and astrology and things of this nature?
Okay. I've been heavily into astrology since 1992.
Mm-hmm.
I learned how to calculate charts before that, though. And cards I got heavily into in very beginning of 1998, so 20 years now.
Gotcha. And we know, and speaking of Heidi Vandenberg, she's in the chat room right now. And we know about, most people know what tarot cards are. Most people know what playing cards are. Ernst, which ones do you think were first, the playing cards or the tarot?
I think the playing cards came first.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because the symbols on the playing cards are really symbols of nature, as I talk about in the course, where spades are trees, hearts are fruits, clubs are the leaves on the tree, and the diamonds are the ground, the crystals that form the ground. And of course, those symbols of nature existed long before the tarot symbols existed, which I call symbols of civilization. So we've got swords, cups, coins, and staves, or batons, whatever you want to call them in the tarot. And those are, of course, sort of, Renaissance, medieval symbols of civilization. And these days, they're not very apt symbols because people don't carry swords anymore. A lot of people don't even use coins anymore, if you think about it, right?
Unless they're Bitcoins.
Unless they're Bitcoins, right? So I think the cards definitely came earlier. I really think they are the same system originally, because the similarities. Well, that system will just come out of thought. Really, if a person studies math, studies numerology, studies the symbols around them, I think people can arrive at those systems in time. But I feel like the cards came earlier, and then tarot caught on in the 15th century. And eventually surpassed the the cards in the occult circles. But in the good old forecasting circles, cards have always been really, really strong, although they didn't catch on in the New Age movement the way the tarot did.
Interesting. Now, Ernst, do you think that back at the beginning in the playing cards that we had the face cards, the jacks, the queens, the kings, were they there?
Yeah. However, the queen was probably not a queen. The queen was probably a cavalier, which is a knight basically,
okay,
or a minister.
And what do you think the king was? Was the king a king?
King was the king. And the minister is the person who assisted the king, or the knight. The cavalier was the guy who assisted the king. Cavalier, I don't think I'm saying that word right. It's not a word we use
anymore. Like a cavalier, you mean?
Cavalier, thank you.
Okay.
And that I think in the cards got replaced by the queens probably in the 15th century, based on what we know. Before that, there's evidence they had these other things besides queens. And that really makes sense to me too, just in the time frame of things, because in Hindu philosophy, we have these different ages. We have the Kali Yuga, which is an age of physical ability, basically sheer strength. And that's an age where men really dominate.
Sure.
We started transiting out of that age into the Dwapara Yuga, which is where the inner parts of man become more useful and developed, at which point the feminine energy started getting stronger. And that actually, the feminine movement literally started back in the 15th century when they started introducing queens into the deck. And it was a very slow progression, But that was actually that was the transition out of the Kali Yuga, which is the dark age of Hindu philosophy, into the Dwapara Yuga, which is the atomic age of electricities and energies, and respecting feminine energy once again.
That's fascinating. Now,
Yeah.
you have said that and continue to teach, and I think it's very profound, that the playing cards themselves are probably, I think you said, the most perfect book out there. If you could have one book, you would probably pick the playing cards.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the most important book ever drawn. You know, I won't use the word written, right? The reason is because it is a perfect book of philosophy that it could address any of our concerns. We don't have to cast the cards to, you know, to learn for them and use them, have them guide us. If we understand the cards, we understand how life works. It is really a book of how life naturally works, following the natural laws for how humans work in this world, really. And so what I love about that book, though, is that it's written in a universal language of symbols of nature and not language, okay? Every other book is limited by the language it's written in, that if it's not your native language, you're not getting it exactly in its purest form. And language, of course, is limited to words, whereas a symbol is limited to your understanding. That's why every time you play around with your cards, like when you made that board and you played with your cards, you got a lot of realizations just taping those cards on, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you can't play with your 52 card book without learning something deeper about that symbol, because your knowledge has gotten deeper. Whereas when you grab a book written in a language, you know, a language of words, you only can go as deep as the author. And then you can think about it on your own and go deeper. But when you read the author's words, they're still the same words, right?
Right.
His level of understanding is, maybe you'll get there someday, okay? But won't go past it. Whereas with the cards, you keep playing with your cards, reading your cards, and you constantly go deeper and deeper and deeper. And there's no end to the level of knowledge you'll arrive at in the cards. The limit is your own capacity, really. And so because it is a book written in universal language, of universal symbols, the truths in that deck are going to be applicable to all men at all times, at any stage of evolution, in any culture. So if somebody finds a chest, my house gets buried one day under a bunch of rock, and 5 million years later, aliens land and discover my house, and I've got the Quran, I've got the Bible, and I got the Gita, I got the Srimad Bhagavatam, and I have a couple other cool things, and I have a deck of cards. The only one of those books that's ever going to be useful to them is the deck of cards, you know, because if they play around with those long enough and look outside and see that there's trees and leaves and dirt and rocks, they'll figure out, if they spend enough time on it, what those cards represent. Where they're never going to learn how to read the Quran unless they find a Windows, you know, translation program or something, you know.
Absolutely. Now, what changes do you think we've seen over the years with the playing deck? Does it kind of look the same as it did originally, or has there been some changes other than with the queens?
Yeah, it's been changed a lot. There's only one change that's hugely important, and that change is the fact that the face cards now are double-headed. And that happened in the latter half of the 1800s. Okay, we want playing cards to have legs for when we cast them, the face cards. They're not face cards, they should be full bodies, actually, you know.
Gotcha.
And we want that so we can read them
don't want
upside
these
down.
double heads, like a head here and a head there.
Yeah, those are fine for putting on a board and teaching with on a board, but they don't show you if the card falls upside down. You can always
so you can't have reverse cards.
Yeah, you can't read them reversed.
Right.
You can draw a line to show the right side up, but what's really cool, you can get these replica 18th century decks, like Civil War decks and pre-Civil War decks, and they're replicas for like $6-7 on Amazon, and they're good little decks.
Oh, nice.
We've also produced some higher class decks for casting cards as well. So that's the biggest important difference. Now, there's a few things that are happening now in playing cards. They always have the same colors. And so a lot of people think that cards have to have these colors to be right. No, they don't. Traditionally, when they had the first decks were being printed in the early 15th century, the cards had, you know, colors in different places. They only used a few basic colors because it was just woodblock printing. So they basically used 3 colors.
Right.
That's why, because those are the 3 colors they woodblocked, you know. But the colors could be in any arrangement. The other thing that a lot of card readers get into is the one-eyed jacks and the suicide kings, and they try to bring that into the interpretation of the card. No, originally there was no one-eyed jack suicide kings. The artist just drew the person how they wanted to. And even now you can buy modern decks, and some decks will show this one as a one-eyed and this as a suicide face card. And there's actually no consistency. And the old decks, I didn't know we were going to talk about the deck so much. Otherwise, I would have had a copy.
Oh, that's all right. I'm sorry.
But it's okay. But the old decks just show that a lot of things we swear by, that some card readers swear by, like, oh, it's a suicide king, none of that had any implication in the old days. So I think they just got in the habit of printing that. And basically what happened is the English took the French deck because the English government started taxing imported playing card decks because playing cards became so popular. So then the French decks were too expensive, so that gave the English a chance to produce them. So the English did these really quick, cheap woodblock prints that weren't nearly as nice as the French prints. And that became the standard playing card. And it basically, over the years, it got sloppier. And then finally, the printing kind of got more modernized the way we see it now. And so it's really just the decks we have now are just a result of cheap cheap English woodblock printing.
Interesting. Now, they didn't originally have the numbers either, did they? Just the number of symbols.
Yeah, they didn't have any numbers on it. It was just symbols, pure symbols. And that's another thing I like. You can get replica decks like that, or we're also producing a deck now that doesn't have. In fact, I need to just send you a complimentary copy. I'll do that tomorrow.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. They don't have the numbers, just the amount of symbols. You know, 7 of spades will have 7 spades on it. Won't have a number 7. It's hard to play cards that way because you have to use your brain. You have to remember what you have because you can't just see how many, you have to kind of keep going like this or just remember. So I think if you play games with that, it's a really fun experience, how much harder it is on your mind to play without the little number in the corner.
Well, what a terrible thing, Ernst, if we have to think more and use our mind more. That's just such a terrible thing. So difficult.
Yeah, I know. Shame.
And it doesn't surprise me a bit that it was Western civilization being cheap and shoddy that changed things.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to mention just about the tarot versus the playing cards is that, as I mentioned, in the New Age world, the tarot really kind of, caught up to the playing cards and overran the playing cards. And so, of course, I got into reading cards first as a tarot reader, However, the reason I wanted to learn tarot, because I had this beautiful deck of cards my sister had bought me when she was in Europe and as a present when I was 12. It was such a beautiful deck of cards. I kept that deck and I wanted to do something with it. And so finally I asked a tarot reader friend of mine to teach me how to read the tarot, because then I knew I could just do the same with the playing cards, But then I got into tarot for a long time, then returned to playing cards later, because the tarot is just so much out there on it. So even though tarot has caught on to the New Age movement, when it comes to the world of concrete predictions, like dealing with details of business affairs, any kind of detailed predictions, card system has actually a much longer and more accurate, I would say, pedigree behind it.
The playing cards versus the tarot.
Yeah, the playing cards. So you'll get playing cards. They have some very specific meanings, like a certain card might be a body of water. A certain card is like a business deal. Like, for instance, me and my wife cast a card recently, and the final card was the 9 of clubs. And this was about wanting to buy a house and closing on a house. Well, 9 of clubs is closing a business deal. It's the final step of a business deal. So when that card came up, it was like, great, we're going to close this deal. And so that, there's these very specific meanings of the playing cards that, for the worldly life that we live, that aren't quite as clearly defined in the tarot card. So anyone who wants like concrete predictions can really work well with the playing cards. Now, so far in the cards of truth, I've mostly taught like conceptual ways to understand the meaning of the cards. But I'll be doing some new courses on that site, including courses on some of these more detailed, centered, specific keywords.
Well, excellent. That means I need to keep my subscription going then, because there's more to learn.
Yeah, I'm teasing you. Yeah, I got to keep it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's actually a really good segue, because one of the most profound things that I've learned from you and from the Cards of Truth system is that, the tarot deck as we have it today, whether it's a Rider-Waite, or whether it's the Thoth deck, or almost of these any other decks, much like the playing cards have been altered, the tarot decks themselves have been very much altered. And I wonder if they haven't really been corrupted. And by corrupted, I mean that some of their original power, maybe some of their original intent, some of their even original accuracy, if it's not been somewhat impugned by the addition of Kabbalistic, Hermetic, Western, or magical symbolism onto the cards, which, if I understand correctly, wasn't there originally, right?
No. And that's really what breaks my heart about tarot, because I actually love tarot and I love tarot decks, and I've got quite an extensive collection of tarot decks. But sadly now I can't stand using any of them because of all that extra junk in there. Tarot used to be really simple. A four of cups was a card with 4 cups on it. Then Waite came along in the late 1800s and created pictures to help us understand the energy of the card. And I think what he did was really good and useful in that context, okay? Because he was just, trying to help us learn to read these cards. This was a neat way to do it, and I think a very useful way and a good step in popularizing tarot.
What was his background, Ernst?
He was in one of these brotherhoods that I don't remember which one it was, the Order of the Golden Dawn or something. There's a few.
So he was a Hermeticist.
I believe he was, yeah. I don't remember because I haven't read those old books in a long time. But yeah, he was one of those Hermeticists that came out and talked about this. And I think the Waite deck, the Rider-Waite as it's called, is certainly one of the best decks a person can use if they want to read tarot cards. I don't have a problem with that part of it. Where I have a huge problem with the current tarot cards is in the major arcana. And this has been going on for a long, long time, even before Waite, but especially since the late 1800s, when lots of people started adding the Kabbalistic symbols, Egyptian symbols, basically symbols that are not found in every culture. A king, all right, every culture has a king, right? A chariot, every culture has a vehicle so they can carry their burdens further, right?
Right.
But does every culture have sphinxes that could possibly draw a chariot? I mean, come on, guys, put in Sphinx, something that's unique to Egypt that, yeah, the whole world knows about now, but not long ago, only Egyptians knew about the Sphinx, And so I have a problem with a lot of these symbols being drawn from all these old cultures that ruin the simplicity of the deck. I also have a huge problem when people have added astrological symbols to the deck. And they'll say, this card is this planet or this sign of the zodiac. None of it works. It's all just complete bullshit, okay? It's really hurt the deck. And because of that, the only deck I can still use that's a tarot deck are the Scapini, the ones you've got there. What are those called again?
They're called the Golden Tarot.
Yeah, that's the name of the cheap print that you can get now, the cheap reprint. It's it's not the Scapini Tarot.
I'm kind of a cheap guy, Ernst.
Yeah, I have that deck too. But so that's the what's it called? Yes, that's the Fool.
Yep.
I'm sorry, it's slipping my mind what the deck is called itself. It's sold as the Golden Tarot, but what's the artist or the family? It comes from an Italian family.
The Visconti.
The Visconti deck. Thank you. There's a lot of different copies of this Visconti deck. There's 4 that I know of. There's the Golden Tarot, which is the best buy one. 16, 17 bucks gets it for you on Amazon.
And it's a really nice box.
Yeah,
they got a nice little bag. The cards are very high quality. They're large. So yeah. I mean, it's a really good buy for 16 bucks.
Yeah, it's a killer buy. I use that one. And you can show on those cards how the pip cards are just simple cups, nothing fancy. and maybe find an empress or what are the yeah. So that's all there is. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is the oldest tarot book. Tarot deck ever made. And there was a few cards missing from that deck that have been painted by modern artists. Yeah, so there's your empress.
Mm-hmm.
She's just a queen, just an empress sitting on her throne.
Mrs. Visconti, actually, right?
Yeah, that's actually Miss Visconti. And why is there an eagle? Well, because that happened to be the Visconti family crest. If another family, there's your Hierophant or your Pope, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So I love that deck. I like using that deck for tarot. There's also a company that makes a smaller size. There's two smaller versions that you can stick in your pocket. Yeah, there's your Emperor.
That's Mr. Visconti, right?
Mr. Visconti, yeah.
Yeah.
And so they had these decks painted for them to play card games. They were custom painted for the family to play cards games. And back then, the only tarot decks, we're talking late 1400s, were basically painted by an artist for rich families. We're talking of 78 cards being painted for families. So only a few families had these cards in Italy, and that's the first sign of actual tarot cards. Playing cards, we have playing cards being printed en masse in wood blocks before we had any tarot cards even painted.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And of course, tarot decks didn't get printed until probably, I believe, in any mass productions until the 16th century.
Fascinating. Fascinating.
Yeah. So
now, was it Right Waiter that first started putting like the numbers on and the names and all that?
I don't think Rider-Waite was the first one to put the numbers on the major arcana, which also I don't like because the numbering order is what one person thought it was, but you should be allowed to work with that and discover your own, what makes sense. I don't find that the numbering order given in modern tarot decks since the Rider-Waite and all those other decks of the late 1800s are accurate or useful at all.
You even said cut them off.
You can just cut them off or put a happy smiley sticker on them, you know. But it's really a shame because there's so many beautifully artistically done decks, and I really want to support artists in creating beautiful tarot or playing card decks. I have one artist, her name's Ayla, who has done one. My wife is working on one, and I hope that other artists will get involved in doing playing cards that are more artistic, more attractive to use, but that don't get all this stupid symbolism in them that's never meant to be there. And so I am into printing those and publishing those as people, as artists do those. I hope one day to have a whole bunch of available options.
Absolutely. And Ernst, in your opinion, what does the addition of the symbolism, how does it detract from the overall effectiveness of the tarot?
Okay. What it does is it keeps it from being a book of wisdom anymore. Now it's just a casting oracle.
Ah, okay.
So for instance, I could make my own deck of cards. I could go and I could find, say, 52 business cards from in my town. And I can shuffle those business cards and I can do a reading for you. And say I cast the light on the star spread in the should do card, I get a contractor's card. I'm going to say you should build your own house. Right? If you ask a question about your house. So I could do that and it would actually work. The cards would fall in respect to the question. But if I took those 52 cards, those 52 business cards, and try to figure out how those were a book of wisdom and how I can learn my life and live a better life following the principles of those cards, chances are I'm going to spend a lot of time at the dentist and getting drunk at the bar and going to hotels and getting massages. Some of that sounds good. Some of it doesn't. I might have a surgeon's card. No, this is not a book of wisdom anymore. So when they start adding all these esoteric symbols to all the cards in sort of a haphazard way, so these other systems have their authenticity. The Kabbalah is a system, and it's a system of wisdom. But now when you try to think you can put it on the tarot cards, right? And now using Kabbalistic tarot, no, use the Kabbalah as Kabbalah. It's a perfect system. Tarot is its own perfect system with a few problems and more problems now, of course. So And as they've added these different symbols, the planetary symbols, this picture, this little birdie, the Sphinx, and so on, now we no longer have the original Book of Wisdom. What we have is just a deck of cards that we can cast oracles to. And oh, lo and behold, the Sphinx, you need to get a cat. And the person goes, wow, I wanted to get a cat forever. And I finally told myself I was gonna get one for my birthday this year. Great reading. It's like, hey, no problem. That'll happen sometimes, okay? And people who are observant, they look at the card, and based on their perceptive ability, a part of the card will jump out at them. The Sphinx will jump out, the whip will jump out, the bow will jump out, whatever's on the card will jump out, and they'll just say something about it, and their intuition will work with the cards. So when it comes from actually reading the cards in a sort of intuitive, psychic way, it doesn't matter what's on your cards. But from a point of view of this is a book of wisdom that follows scientific principles, it ruins the science and therefore ruins the wisdom. And the science and the wisdom is what's important. It's not the fact that we can do oracles. If we can do oracles with a proper scientific deck, and then also we can do the birth card system, because that is scientific and won't work with false symbols because it's based on your birth date. And your birth date is not going to adjust to false symbols, right?
Right.
The cards will fall in respect to any symbol you put on it, you know, in a casting. But in respect to your birth card, you were born on a certain time, and that's a scientific fact. And the cards have to have the right symbolism to work in that system.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
So what I think I hear you saying is when we add the symbolism to the tarot, while we're not hurting ourselves when we're trying to make them an oracle or a predictive tool, but we are throwing out a lot of their capacity as a standalone, time-tested, really outside of time and space book of wisdom and learning and truth that really transcends the, I would say, maybe this is just my opinion, but really transcends the oracle nature of the cards. And we're really kind of stealing from ourselves a great lesson and repository of wisdom by tinkering with it to make it better for our own, I don't want to say entertainment, but you know what I mean.
It's just people trying to, it's really just people thinking they know better, I think, instead of just tuning into the system and learning it. And the problem is that no one is ever going to be happy because of predicting the future. We're only going to be happy if we grow in wisdom. So if we damage the cards in the context of the wisdom they can give, then we ruin our opportunities to be happy. You know?
Interesting.
And even Waite said that the only purpose of these cards is to give you wisdom. And the fact that we push them as fortune-telling tools is the only good thing about pushing them as fortune-telling tools is it keeps it alive. It keeps people interested. But the real purpose of these cards is to teach you wisdom.
Gotcha.
And I think of all the modern variations, he did some good stuff. You know, I think he added too many things to the major arcana, but a lot of those things had already been added previously. This started actually in the 1700s, is really when they started butchering the tarot cards. By the time that Waite got it, they were quite butchered and had a lot of strange symbols. And he just kind of kept most of those symbols, maybe added a few more. But he really should have, it's a sad thing he didn't go back further for the major arcanas, because what he did with adding, I think it's a great way for people to be introduced to the system. But I think it's better to go to cards with no picture, just the blank symbols, and scientifically understand your system.
Interesting. Here's a question that I'm glad came up, and I'm sure you've been asked it before, Ernst, but what is your take on the whole idea of the tarot being the hero's journey?
Oh, like the major arcana being the hero's journey.
Right, exactly.
I would not equate it exactly to the hero's journey. And I think it could be equated, but I don't think it's exactly that. Or maybe it is more than I know, but the hero's journey needs some adjustment itself. And maybe studying the cards will give a clear vision of what the hero's journey could really be like. To me, the cards are just real obvious about how life continues itself, how we continue, how life propagates, how we propagate our existence, basically. We propagate our existence along this mathematical way, simply speaking.
Right.
And by propagating our existence, I mean, we meet someone, we fall in love, we break up, then we fall in love again. And there's a cycle of this, right? And throughout that cycle, there's a certain chain of events that always happen. They can happen to different degrees, so one phase might last a long time, like a two of hearts phase, the I'm madly in love, dancing like a fool might last a long time, or it might last 5 seconds. You hardly notice it. But
Right.
There's always these concurrent events happening that the cards really show. And, there's a lot of things going on in the hero's journey that I don't think are really addressed by the cards, that I think are, like the first fact that in the hero's journey, the hero loses his parents. Why is that? Why is that an important part of his journey, to be an orphan or have lost a parent, right? Well, that's an important part to the hero's journey, because all of us feel like we don't have a person there who's really going to be able to take care of us in the way we need them to. Even if we had parents, we feel deep down inside that there's someone who's there, there's not anyone really there who really can take care of us. And that is in our consciousness, no matter how good our parents are to us, because when our consciousness is separated from God's consciousness, we realize the separation from a powerful being. And we symbolize that as losing our parents, which are the powerful being from an infantile point of view when we're an infant. I wouldn't say that's exactly shown in the cards, though, in a really clear way, although I think it could probably be worked into there with little imagination. So I wouldn't say it exactly equates to the hero's journey. I think the signs of the zodiac probably equate better. I have a student who's been working on that, and what he's talked to me about that sounds very, very interesting. And he's going to do more work on that. And his name's Corey. He's a really great guy.
Excellent. Excellent. And somebody asked Ernst, if it works, and if you can read it, and I think they're talking about in divinatory fashion, if it works and if you can read it, why does this system matter?
When it comes from just casting cards, it doesn't matter. However, the advantage of playing cards is you can also use the birth card system. And the birth card system is when we take your time, date, and place, and you get your personal spread. That's your birth spread. And that's this, of course, this is saying for the audience, right?
Right.
So, and every year you get a new spread, and every year is broken into 52-day periods. And every day you get a new spread. So we can time things based on your birth card. You can't do that with any card system. It's a scientific system that uses birth card symbolism. It's an astrological system, basically, that uses playing card symbolism. What's so great about it is that you can, like, everyone has a birth spread. Once I did a card casting for someone, and a card came up, like a Queen of Diamonds came up in a negative place, upside down. So in the environment place. So I said, there's a Queen of Diamonds that is going to make your life hard in the future. So we asked about the people in her life, and we found a person important to her in her life that time who was a Queen of Diamonds, birth card. And lo and behold, a week later, that person gives her problems and causes trouble. So we found who the person was because we knew that person's birth card. So when you start casting the cards and using the birth card system together, now you've got a super powerful system that's way more powerful than just casting cards alone.
Absolutely.
And they work together.
And the birth card system can get so refined that you can even look at specific periods of specific days, correct?
Yeah, you can break your day down into periods of 7 periods of, which is a few hour long periods, you bet.
Interesting. Now, I have the advantage. I think it's an advantage. Some might say it's a disadvantage, but I didn't come into this whole realm, Ernst, this whole paranormal realm until about maybe 6 years ago. And then I didn't even start coming into the world of tarot and cards maybe until about 3 years ago. And I think that although it leaves me kind of like a dummy, it does give me some inherent objectivity, I think. And when I was first shown the hero's journey of the tarot, I was, they were showing me it, and it never made sense to me that the magician was the number 2 card. I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. He should be back towards the end. And then when I went through your system, like, now that makes sense to me, because it makes more logical sense. It's more of a, like you said, a big book of wisdom sense. And there's some people that are professionals that know what they're doing in the chat room, and they're less than convinced by, our convictions. Share, if you would, if someone is very sure that they love the symbolism, they love the numbers, they love the astrological signs on the cards, and if they decided to, just for an experiment, use some cards that didn't contain all of that, what kind of experiences do you think they would have?
Well, what I would say first, take what you know about tarot and shift it to the playing cards. So spades or wands, clubs or swords, cups or hearts, and coins or diamonds. Okay. Then you got to throw out your knights. Now, and what I think happened is that there was the the king, the minister, and the page originally. And then the minister was also sometimes shown as a knight. Okay. Then the queen got introduced, and in playing cards, they tossed out the knight and replaced it with the queen. So we have king, queen, jack now. Okay. But I think the tarot embraced the card and added 4 cards. So we've got, 4 face cards. But the knight in card system, all the things that knights are doing, the big important things that the knights are making happen, those are the things the queens do. Okay. And then the jacks, of course, do the things that the pages do. But they're a lot more important. And a simple way to look at the face cards is that the jacks are the creators. They create something, they initiate something. They bring the new things. They are the new things. The queens are the ones that take those new things and work them into a really productive, successful place. And the kings are the ones who decide what to do with all that, wealth gained by the queens. And what they're going to do is always do something useful to maintain the continuity of life and well-being of those they're responsible for. So with a little shifting, they can use those face cards. And then they can start casting with face cards, and they're probably going to feel really uncomfortable with it. Okay, casting with playing cards, because they're going to be used to seeing their favorite tarot deck, and it'll be really hard at first. But people who've studied tarot more scientifically, of course, will have an easier time with that. But where I think it's time to be tested is to get a printout of their birth card spread from the website, cardsoftruth.com. You can get a free printout of your birth card spread. And then look at your spread and just remember, look at the card you are and remember that, and read it like a tarot card. But if it's a diamond, it's a coin and so on, like I mentioned. And just see, as a tarot reader, what you can get from your birth card spread when you substitute your tarot meanings to their appropriate suits with the cards, okay? And then see how that works. And I think that's really, I wouldn't tell someone, yeah, go drop the tarot just so you can learn to predict with playing cards. I don't think it's gonna make them a better predictor, a better reader, okay? However, I would say, learn the birth card system. And if you still want to use tarot cards after that, fine. But I'll bet 9 out of 10 of y'all is going to want to cast with playing cards.
Do you think there's an advantage to learning to start using quote unquote naked tarot cards rather than the ones with the symbols and numbers? And
I would only use naked tarot cards, ones that haven't been, added to.
Why?
I would only use the Visconti deck. I wouldn't read or some other real simple decks. Or if I had another deck, I'd just ignore everything else. I mean, I was using fancy tarot decks, but I always read them like Viscontis. Just once I found the Viscontis, I'm like, okay, this is the oldest thing. And after that, I would use my fancy decks, but I just ignored all the other junk on them. I just read them as what they were, not based on the pictures on them.
Gotcha. Let me make a statement and see if, go ahead, finish your thought.
Oh, no, you go ahead. I'm kind of forgetting what I wanted to say, but I'll remember it.
Again, as kind of a neophyte and, coming in with some inherent objectivity. You know, I have a lot of respect for the system of Kabbalah. I have a lot of respect for the Hermetic system. I have a lot of respect for the Egyptian wisdom system. And I have a lot of respect for tarot and for the playing decks. And the way my mind works is to go back to the earliest, to go back to, you know, the most ancient. And I think, and I'm going to ask you to respond to this, I think that we do much better when we allow the systems to stand alone and to glean the wisdom from those systems individually. And when we start to combine them and start to mix them, we're really, and this is my word, not yours, we're bastardizing the systems. And I think we do much better by going to the most ancient sources of Hermeticism, of Egyptian wisdom, you know, and of Kabbalistic thought and of the tarot, and letting each one stand on its own and learning the unique perspectives on universal and timeless wisdom that they give, rather than trying to use our own understanding to maybe combine them. And I think we might, in combining, we might overcook the stew, so to speak, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that definitely is a danger of happening. You know, instead of understanding tarot or playing cards as cards, understanding them as Kabbalistic things is not really an ideal thing, I don't think.
Right.
You know, I do think that playing cards and tarot have a common foundation because they are so similar. I think they both have helped to maintain the integrity of card reading. The playing cards, I think, have done so by maintaining the oldest symbols, which are the symbols of the nature. And I think of course, in the tarot, they've kept the major arcana, which we don't see in playing cards, of course, right?
Right.
But the major arcana are really important, and they're often considered to be keys of the tarot. How I see them is they literally are keys of all the numbered cards.
Right.
So we have black cards and we have red cards. And the black cards are half of the arcana have to do with the black cards, the other half have to do with the red cards. And I explain all this on the site, of course. And then the progression of the cards of the tarot, we got 2 progressions from 1 through 10 happening in different realms. And that gives us 11 cards for every realm, the realm itself, plus a progression of 10 things within that realm, which equals 22 arcana cards. And I use the meanings of the arcana all the time. Now, when I was doing tarot, I always hated when I got a major arcana coming up as a final outcome. I didn't mind it so much when it happened somewhere else, but I hated when major arcanas came up as a final outcome because you want the final outcome to be a concrete thing. It's really concrete, right? Well, major arcanas are a little more mystical. And so one of the things I learned to do from a tarot reader was that if you get a major arcana, the event's gonna resolve itself through the person being that major arcana card or playing it that way. But then you throw another card down to find the final outcome. So I would always lay another card down until I get that final outcome as a PIP card, a numbered card, which has to do with the tangible, concrete occurrence, because I want to give that person a tangible, concrete answer. Now, with the playing cards, of course, we don't have the major arcanas getting in the way. So every card is a concrete answer. It's a concrete, definitive statement that we can make, that the person can relate to in a concrete way. Because face it, people come to get their cards read because they want concrete answers to concrete problems, not new age garbage about their life in heaven, okay? You know, people who want predictions want concrete stuff. And I always thought the majors got in the way of that. But I love the majors, arcana, because there's so much wisdom there. So I see the major arcanas as being the keys to understanding all the numbered cards. So if I see a black 9 come up, I know that I've got the Hermit coming up too. Yep. So in any position, if I see a black 9, I might just read it as the Hermit. So I'm using every card as a major arcana if I want to. I have a major arcana attitude, and that's there because every concrete event has an energy to it that awakens and stimulates and works with something that's happening inside of you, i.e. a major arcana card. You know?
Yes.
That's right. And so I'm always working with the major arcana, although I never cast them, anymore.
Gotcha.
I just cast my playing cards.
So
We do have
you don't cast the arcana anymore at all.
Hardly ever.
Okay.
I would maybe do it if a person just wanted to know about them more and they weren't concerned and they didn't even want concretes. Then I'd focus on the major.
If they just wanted like a wisdom reading or something.
A wisdom reading. Then I would use the majors, and I usually use those standalone. Are the deck we've
It's
produced?
so funny because before I even met you, I was thinking myself, I almost threw away all of my other tarot cards except for the major arcana and was just working with the major arcana because it was a wisdom system. I was actually calling it a wisdom system. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's a lot of card readers who use the majors in really concrete ways according to what they've learned and the keywords they picked up. And again, if that's what's in your consciousness, the cards are going to fall in respect to what's in your consciousness.
Right.
And those people's abilities to read cards is based on their wisdom, how much they know, and their experience, right?
Right.
But the thing about playing cards is now we can do the birth card system. And the birth card system is something that once you've seen it and worked with it, you don't want to be without of it because it's just too cool. Because, especially for yourself, because, casting cards for yourself is a recipe for disaster usually.
Like being your own lawyer.
Yeah, being your own lawyer. It's not. It's like being your own surgeon where you have to put yourself under first. I'm totally cool with being your own surgeon as long as you don't have to put yourself under first. Okay, so I have this way that I teach my students that when they're casting cards for themselves, to ask the deck for permission first to see if they're allowed to ask the deck. And if not, you'll find that readings for yourself are often giving haphazard results where they're not really working. But with the birth card system, because it's an astrological scientific system of time, you can predict about your future without casting cards. And you can do it anytime you want. You just have to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to try to figure out what's going to happen the next time I get the 7 of spades running, and you can see it. And then you can go back. When was the last time I had the 7 of spades in my Mars card? What happened then? And then you could identify, 20 years ago, this happened. And it's coming up next month. Do I want to, and then you can make predictions about it. So you can especially predict about yourself very effectively, much more effectively than most people will predict for themselves by casting cards for themselves.
Makes perfect sense.
That's another advantage of it.
One last question, Ernst. Someone asked, and I know you've addressed this in the on the Cards of Truth. Do you think that your will can overcome the predictions or the results of a casting of the cards?
There is no such thing as personal will. It's just a delusion. There's only fate and God's will manifesting through us. And so, no, when a person says my will, they mean their egocentric will. And the ego has no will, has no power. It's just an idea. It's an idea of separate existence, and it doesn't exist. And when people say my will, they usually refer to their egocentric will. So if they're referring to their egocentric will, then no, it's not going to happen. However, there's a lot of things in life that are God's will that aren't going to be indicated in our chart, like our astrological chart. They say 75% of our life is indicated in our horoscope. It's a result of fate, and 25% is God's will. But if you live in a fully egocentric condition, the other 25% just follows the patterns of your 75% to their natural conclusions. And but when regards to a casting, if the person reads your cards right, yes, it's going to work, because how those cards fall is in accordance with God's will at that time. But the thing is, God doesn't always want you to know the right answer right now. So he will make the card reader read the cards wrong. And every reader has examples of this where they have made a bad prediction, but it ends up serving the person better than a good prediction.
Interesting.
Because sometimes it's not in that person's best interest, their highest best interest, to know about something in the future, at which point the card reader won't be able to determine it. The cards won't fall. God doesn't want them to. So when we're casting the cards, we're in a special moment where we're working to help them get the insights about their divine plan that the divine wants them to know.
Fascinating. I don't know if you want to answer this, Ernst,
Mhm.
but someone says, what is your definition of God?
To me, God is life. God
Light?
is energy. God is
Okay.
energy. God is life. God is intelligent, conscious energy.
I'd find that hard to disagree with. That's a
But
very profound
that's
answer.
that's God as in a manifested form. So all of creation is energy. Energy has intelligence. That is God. That's the God we can get in touch with. But then beyond creation, there's God beyond creation, which we can't define. We can't even begin to define it. So we
That's
can
true.
call the Holy Ghost, for instance, is this intelligent consciousness that is energy itself,
Absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, Ernst, if people are interested in learning more about the Cards of Truth system or about your Vedic astrology system, what should they do?
They can just go to cardsoftruth.com. That's the card site, or astrologyvideos.com. Right now, I'm actually running a 2-for-1 special. Um, if anyone wants to learn both, you can sign up for both for the price of one. If you do the 6-month or the 12-month memberships, not on the month by month, because I have to do it all manually and I can't go in there every month and extend your thing and keep track of your payments, because I have to do other things. So if people pay the 6-month for $150 or the 12-month for $295, they can get both of those together. Or they can just go to one of the sites and subscribe for $29.95 a month and quit anytime they want. I have a week for $25, but you might as well get a month for $29.95 and just cancel it before you get billed a second time.
Right. And that's an excellent deal. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh man, I could have learned them both. But I have to be honest with you, Ernst. I dabbled enough with the astrology to know that it's not something that is meant for Jeff Darty to learn and know. It's just not me. But the Cards of
Okay,
Truth fit me like a glove.
great, glad to hear it.
And
I
I'm
mean,
really
personally,
enjoying
I
it.
think cards are better for most people because the world of Vedic astrology is bigger than most people have time for and does more things than most people ever need to do. Cards are just the right package, that they're so powerful. You can do everything, but there's not such a morass and buffet of details that you can get lost in for years and years. And you can just get right to the focus, get the job done, and continue to get the job done and better and more capably as you progress. But you can learn everything you need to get the job done in a year. And that includes the birth card system. You know, that's not just casting cards. We're talking a whole system of astrology with card casting that a person of average intelligence can learn in a year. And I know people in 6 months started casting professionally with the system, people who are really sharp and quick learners. We're charging money with the system in 6 months. And most importantly, having very successful readings.
That's very powerful. I tell you what, it's great stuff. I'm very enthralled with the Cards of Truth. It was, the missing part of, not only my, my work, but also my spiritual growth. So I want to, take, if I was wearing a hat, I would take it off to you and say thanks
You're
for
welcome.
developing the system. It really is powerful.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, Ernst, before we bring this to a close?
Well, I want to add, of course, I didn't develop the birth card system. I've just defined it a lot more, try to make it a little more precise and detailed, add a lot of details to it. But it's been something that's been under development for a little over a century now, since it was kind of became public knowledge in the late 1800s.
Well, I know that it's definitely awesome. I found it to be very powerful, and I think it's just a profound system, and that anyone, even if they dabble in it all the way up to learn it completely, they're going to do themselves a favor. It will definitely add to your spirituality, and it will give you a lot more tools to be able to help people if that's what your calling and your leading and guiding is.
Yeah, you know what I do for a lot of people? I work with a lot of medical cases these days. A lot of these people are just emotionally shattered, just emotionally barely hanging on. And one of the things I offer to a lot of these people is a subscription to the card site, not because they're going to be card readers, because simply learning the first part of, the first course, the first part of that course is all about understanding the cards as a book of wisdom. And this, a lot of times, just watching those videos with no intention of even reading cards, but just as a philosophical and psychological adventure, has really, really changed these people's lives. And I think that's really the best thing about it. If you understand the cards, it can just help us so much in our lives and how we feel and in our philosophy. It's a very sound book of philosophy, and that's my favorite thing about it.
Well, I can certainly attest to that, and I can say that it's very, very true in my life. Ernst, I want to thank you for joining me again. Hopefully, we can have you back again in the future, and keep up the good work on Cards of Truth, okay?
Good. Great seeing you.
All right. Hang on just one second. Let me say goodbye to you personally, everyone.
Yeah.
This has been Ernst Wilhelm from Cards of Truth. It's www.cardsoftruth.com. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your input. I'll see you again later on with some more broadcast excellence. Until then, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, saying have a great afternoon.